Coming up on Network Africa. Over 40 people killed as heavy rains and flood cause a dam to burst its banks in Nairobi, Kenya. Citizens in Togo vote in delayed parliamentary and regional elections amid tensions over a new law reform. Plus, African leaders gather in Nairobi for the World Bank Summit. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olarinde. Welcome to the program. Citizens in Togo are voting in delayed parliamentary and regional elections amid tensions over a new constitution extending the president's term. About 4 million voters are choosing 113 lawmakers and 179 regional deputies who, along with municipal councillors, will install a newly created Senate. Opposition parties argue that the reform passed by lawmakers last week is a ruse to keep President Faure-Asingbe in power. The change allows him to remain president until 2031, according to critics, after which he could be appointed to the new position of President of the Council of Ministers, in effect Prime Minister, continuing his family's 57-year rule. Now, some critics have voiced skepticism about the credibility of the election after authorities temporarily stopped election accreditation for foreign press. And there are reports of a low turnout on the elections taking place in Togo. Over in Kenya, more than 40 people have died after a dam burst following heavy rains and flooding. Officials say homes have been swept away and roads cut off after the dam burst in Kamuchiri village in western Kenya. So far, more than 80 people have been killed in floods that have devastated parts of the country in the last month. Local media reports say rescue teams continue to dig through the mud in search of survivors in the village near the small town of Mihu. And elsewhere, volunteers and residents in the east were searching late on Sunday for missing people after a boat capsized. The vessel carrying dozens of people after the Tana River, and that's the nation's longest river, burst its banks. Survivors in Garissa County were brought to the Buratana nursing home. And as a result of the floods, the Kenyan government has had to postpone the reopening of schools by a week. Now, data shows schools across the country have been adversely affected by the floods. Education Minister Ezekiel Machogu, in a statement, says it will be imprudent to risk the lives of learners and staff before measures are put in place. Now, all schools were scheduled to open for the second term today, the 29th of April, but will now open next week on the 6th of May. Some schools are hosting some people who have been displaced by the floods. Well, joining us now is Kenyan journalist Cyrus Ombati in Nairobi. Hello, Cyrus. A lot to unpack here in Kenya. How are you and the average Kenyan coping with the flooding situation?
Thank you for having the show. Actually, as you put clearly, the situation is dire, it's bad because as we are speaking now, it's raining all over the country, especially in Nairobi. And so far, the number who people have died is more than now 150. Since yesterday, remember today, where you said there were flooding somewhere called Mayu, 48 bodies have been recovered and tens of people have been missing. Yesterday, as they put it very clearly, in Tana River, there were 20 people on the boat, 23 were rescued and the rest are missing. So, so far they have recovered 2 bodies. Then in Central Kenya here, there were also an incident of a landslide which killed 6 people. So The situation is dire actually as we speak.
So landslides, the dams bursting, schools having to delay their resumption. So many effects of this flooding we're seeing across the country. Help us understand, the specific nature of each incident. How many people, are still yet unaccounted for?
And that put is very clear. Tens of people are missing because, the incident where a dam burst last night, it swept through almost 100 homes, assuming each home has 4 people. Those are 400 people. So far, the people have been rescued. They are almost 120. So we can say almost 100 others are missing because the bodies which have recovered, these are say 48, and the numbers are increasing. When we go to Tanariva, the northern part of the country, there was a boat which capsized. It had 43 people, 23 people were rescued. So we can say 20 are missing because 18 are missing because 2 bodies were recovered this morning. In central Kenya here, where we said 6 people are died in a landslide, the many cows are missing, and then the domestic animals are missing. So you can imagine the situation how it is as we stand because going downstream to the coast, the situation is also dire. People are marooned in our homes. People are marooned in towns. There's no food supply there. So the situation is going to be dire in the coming days because people are relying on roads to connect for food, to connect for home, to connect to other places. Schools have been closed. The reopening has been postponed. So it means that they have to monitor the situation to see how it's going. But as it we stand, the meteorological department is saying that the rains are going to continue until May. So it's an issue of waiting until what's happening next.
Indeed, and the government is trying to do as the government is trying to do all it can, and the schools not resuming until next week. But the education minister says measures need to be put in place ahead of that next week resumption on the 6th of May. What measures are this that the government is looking to put down for the safety of the students and the staff?
And that's a challenge because some of these schools, as you clearly put, they are now kind of camps for those people who have been displaced. Some of these
Yes.
schools are flooded. They have no classes to go to. So, in as much as you're saying that they are putting in place measures to address the issue, it's difficult to address the issue because the roads are cut and the schools are acting as centers to cater for to take care of those who are displaced. The schools are flooded, so you can see this is a situation where which you have to wait and see how the situation it goes by. So it's not an issue of putting in place measures to address the issue. It's an issue of waiting to and see what happens next.
All right, then, even as we wait and see, we do hope for some respite. Thank you so much, Cyrus Mbati, a Kenyan journalist in Nairobi.
Thank you so much for having the show.
Well, staying with Kenya in Nairobi, several African leaders have gathered for the World Bank's International Development Association Summit, IDA 21. Now, the two-day summit aims to address development challenges on the continent and also work towards creating prosperous, inclusive, and sustainable economies. Among the leaders attending the summit include Vice President of Nigeria, Kashim Shettima, who is representing President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. A statement by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Communications, Office of the Vice President, says Senator Shettima is expected to take a lead role in advocating for Nigeria's vision of a transformative IDA 21 financing package to accelerate development across the continent over the 2024 to 2026 period. Now, other African heads of states and government officials have said rich countries need to commit record contributions to help developing nations combating climate change. At the meeting, Kenya's President William Ruto also called on donors to pay at least $120 billion into a specially created low-interest World Bank facility for the nations combating climate change. Well, Nigeria's president has again defended his decision to remove the fuel subsidy in the country, maintaining it was necessary to avoid going bankrupt as a nation. President Bola Tinubu gave his position During a panel session at the special World Economic Forum meeting on global collaboration, growth and energy for development, alongside President Paul Kagame of Rwanda and other world leaders gathered in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Now, he says his vision is to reset the country's economy and create a new pathway for growth. Our correspondent, Lanre Lasisi, reports.
Amidst deepening geopolitical tensions, tight financial conditions, and mounting debt pressures, world leaders in government, business, and the academia gather in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, for a special meeting of the World Economic Forum. The focus is on global collaboration, growth, and energy for development.
As the chairman of the ECOWAS.
Speaking during the opening plenary, which focused on a new vision for global development, President Bola Tinubu outlined the steps his administration has taken to reform and reset the Nigerian economy for growth.
Concerning the question of the subsidy removal, there's no doubt that it was a necessary action for my country not to go bankrupt. One, to reset the economy and the pathway to growth. It is going to be difficult, but the hallmark of leadership is taking difficult decisions at the time it ought to be taken decisively. That was necessary for the country. Yes, there will be blowback. There is expectation that the difficulty in it will be felt by a greater number of the people. But once, I believe it was their interest that is the focus of the government. It is easier to manage and explain the difficulties. Along the line, there is a parallel arrangement to really cushion the effect of the subsidy removal on the vulnerable population of the country.
He also drew the attention of the world on the need to ensure peace, stability, and economic growth is entrenched in the Sahel region.
We had the big influence of Nigeria to discourage unconstitutional change of government. Equally, we have eased the sanctions. We need to trade with one another, not fight each other. It is very, very necessary and compulsory.
Other members of the panel added their views on steps that must be taken to reignite development and economic cooperation across the world.
If you look at it from the perspective of the global shocks that we talk about here and there, irrespective of where they have come from, all countries in the world are affected. Of course, some affected more than others. But that's fine. But that is a reminder that we need to therefore look at what has been talked about, the inclusiveness that we are talking about, and collaboration that brings different entities of the world together. We must be able to call out hypocrisy for whenever we see it. And it is there because we keep talking about North-South divide or other divides, but we don't find easily and quickly the solution to that.
Trade and financial flows are the transmission lines of prosperity, and it would be a huge mistake to lose them. So focus on that. Reforms pay off very, very well. So if we can have that leadership strength within countries to do the right thing and across countries to work together, the optimists in the room would say we are right. Optimism is well grounded.
The conclusion at the panel discussion is that the issue of inclusivity must be central to a new vision of global development. And that vision, they say, must involve urgent and concrete action. From Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, Lanre Lasese for Channels Television News.
Welcome back to the program. The African continent has a lot to gain if they come together to harness resources and potentials to enhance their common and shared interests instead of focusing on competing with one another. Well, this is according to the Consul General of South Africa to Nigeria, Professor Bobby Moreau, who gave this advice at a public lecture which examines the bilateral relations between Nigeria and South Africa in the last 30 years.
Formal diplomatic relations between Nigeria and South Africa began in 1994, and both have endured a complex but long history of kinship with remarkable progress, yet with serious existential challenges. Despite these challenges, the Consul General of South Africa to Nigeria, who is the guest lecturer at this public lecture held at Bowen University in Osun State, believes there's cause to celebrate 30 years of unbroken diplomatic relations between the two countries.
Although South Africa and Nigeria...
He notes that the challenges of inequality, poverty, unemployment, and insecurity are some of the inhibiting factors to the actualization of national unity and social cohesion for these two African nations.
The story is that the relations between South Africa and Nigeria are significant for both countries' international relations engagement and edged in the very strong foundations of a shared common history of colonialism. Firstly, in Africa, they are amongst the two biggest economic giants, but they also carry the burden of ensuring that they both support the countries of the continent to grow their economies and reduce unemployment, poverty, and inequality.
With at least 36 agreements negotiated and signed to facilitate and strengthen economic and political relations, promote trade opportunities and social cohesion, this public lecture seeks to promote seamless trading opportunities and smooth political and cultural integration.
South Africa and Nigeria are the two continental giants, and one thing that we cannot continue to do is to compete with each other. We rather collaborate and make use of our complementarities in order to make sure that we spearhead the process of industrialization in Africa successfully, because the rest of the continent relies on our competencies, it relies on our GDPs, it relies on our populations.
A professor of international relations who chairs the lecture is excited at the insights provided by the lecture and hopes it will help improve diplomatic ties between Nigeria and South Africa.
The gaps is just in the perception, and I believe that with this kind of education we have today, it's likely that we will continue to define relationship properly with the cooperation rather than the conflict and competition.
Sharing similar sentiments, the management of Bowen University is optimistic that the lecture provides a pathway to bridging identified gaps and hopes that the benefits from diplomatic kinship will be mutual going forward.
Most foreigners living in Nigeria have been having quite a good time, which has not been the same thing in South Africa. And I think that is the major one that probably the South African government may need to look at.
The shared history and ties between Nigeria and South Africa have been marked with volatility and tension in recent years. This public lecture seeks to change in the narrative by erasing mutual suspicion and promoting trust and mutual respect for a more prosperous and peaceful diplomatic union between both countries.
In its support for Palestine and Israel.
Well, South Africa celebrated 30 years of Freedom Day over the weekend. Let's have that story now and more that happened over the weekend.
On Saturday, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa held the 2024 Freedom Day celebrations at the Union Buildings in Pretoria, marking the 30th anniversary of the country's democratic dispensation. Dozens of locals gathered at the celebration site taking photos with 30 years of freedom banners, listening to speakers, and singing along with artists.
As we celebrate today, we recall and honor all those who fought for justice, for peace, for freedom in our land. We bow our heads to them in gratitude. Together we worked hard and with purpose to bring about a reconciliation between the races in our country. The weight of centuries of oppression was no longer holding us down. Even though our heads bore scars of the cruel lashes of those who whipped and subjected us for more than 300 years.
On April 27, 1994, about 20 million black South Africans took part in the nationwide election and exercised an essential right to choose their own future, the right that had been denied to them by a white minority government. It indicated the official end of apartheid system of racial segregation and oppression in South Africa. Still on Saturday, thousands gathered at the Abubakar Zangole Lamizana Stadium to attend the official opening of Burkina Faso's Semaine National de la Culture, as a National Culture Week, in Bobo Dioulasso. Interim President Ibrahim Traoré joined the ceremony as participants paraded in colorful national costumes. Musicians and dancers delivered dynamic performances which captured a lively atmosphere from the audience. The Culture Week's opening ceremony was attended by several other officials in the Burkinabe government, as well as guests of honor from the Alliance of Sahel States. The lavish Culture Week is Burkina Faso's grandest celebration and takes place once every 2 years in Bobo Dioulasso. The festive event often features various activities, including arts and crafts exposition, traditional performances, and trade fairs. This year's version marks the 21st time the event is held. The Culture Week lasts for 7 days. And on Sunday, hundreds of Ethiopian Orthodox devotees flocked to the Bole Medhalialem Church for prayers to mark Palm Sunday, the Christian holiday celebrated a week before Easter. This year, Orthodox Christians celebrated Palm on April 28th, while the Catholic and Protestant churches marked the occasion on April 13th. Christians gathered in front of the church, listening to prayers delivered by priests. Worshippers are also seen with palm branches and leaves, which they wear on their heads as symbols of the feast. Palm Sunday is traditionally celebrated around the world on Sunday before the Easter to commemorate the entry of Jesus into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey.
Other stories now. Diplomats from Nigeria and the U.S. have converged on the banquet hall of the State House in Abuja for the 6th session of the Nigeria-U.S. Binational Commission. The Nigeria-U.S. Commission was inaugurated in 2010 to serve as a strategic dialogue designed to expand mutual cooperation across a broad range of shared interests between the two countries. It is also a collaborative forum to build partnerships for tangible and measurable progress on issues critical to their shared future. The partnership between Nigeria and the U.S. cuts across economy, security, health, and in the area of technology. The two-day event in Abuja is aimed at reviewing the diplomatic relations between Nigeria and the U.S. for mutual benefits and development of both countries. UN police advisors are educating South Sudanese students on how to prevent and report incidents of sexual and gender-based violence, and also the importance of going to school to create better future opportunities for themselves. The Blue Helmets, serving with the UN mission in South Sudan, recently visited a secondary school in Yambio. That's the capital of Western Equatoria State, to talk to about 25 students about children's rights. Girls and women in South Sudan are often disadvantaged by harmful cultural practices, the early enforced marriages and pregnancies that frequently cause them to leave school, and also vulnerable common incidents of sexual and other forms of gender-based violence.
Come here to teach them because you know very well that the children are the future of the country. If we teach the children, we are teaching the community. They will also impart to their families to have a secure environment as well as secure community, so that they are also not involved in criminal activities.
And finally, on the program, British Prince Harry and wife Meghan Markle will be touring Nigeria next month following an invitation by the country's Chief of Defense Staff. According to a press release signed by defense spokesperson Togo, the visit is to consolidate Nigeria's stronghold at the Invictus Game and the possibility of hosting the event in later years. Well, the Invictus Games is a sport event for military personnel wounded in action. Last year, Nigeria debuted at the Games, winning gold and bronze medals and becoming the first African country to participate in the event. Although the exact date for Harry and Meghan's visit is yet to be announced, the statement says they will engage in various activities during their trip, including meeting military members and experiencing local cultural activities. That's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.